On a dry Tuesday morning in June of 1983, just outside of Boone County, Iowa, a brand-new John Deere 4440 sat idling at the edge of a 160-acre field, its paint still bright enough to reflect the sun like glass. The man standing beside it, 38 years old, clean boots, pressed shirt, and a dealer's confidence in his posture, checked his watch twice in under a minute. His name was Carl Whitaker, and he had exactly 3 hours to prove something to a man who hadn't asked for proof. Across the gravel road, leaning against a fence post that had been there since before Carl was born, stood a different kind of farmer, 72 years old, worn hat, boots that had seen more harvest than Carl had birthdays. His name was Walter Green, and behind him, half hidden in a weather machine shed, sat a 1948 Farmall M, faded red, chip paint, bought for $400 at a farm auction in March of 1969. Carl smiled, not kindly. He walked across the road, boots crunching gravel, hands tucked into his belt like a man already collecting a debt. "You still planning on using that thing?" he asked, nodding toward the shed. Walter didn't move right away, just watched him. Then he said, calm as morning air, "It's already planned. Let me tell you about that machine. That Farmall M wasn't just old. It was considered obsolete by 1983 standards. 38 drawbar horsepower, no cab, no air conditioning, manual steering stiff enough to test a man's shoulders. It had been bought new in 1948 by Walter's father for $2,250, right after returning from war work in Des Moines. It had plowed every acre of that land since Truman was in office. It had never left the farm. And according to Carl, it had no business being there anymore. Carl tapped the side of his own tractor when he spoke, like a man introducing a racehorse. "This," he said, "is a 130-horsepower machine, power shift transmission, hydraulic capacity you couldn't even use up if you tried. Brand new engine rebuild last winter. You're looking at the future." Walter nodded once. "I'm looking at a tractor," he said. There were others there by then. 2 neighboring farmers, a part salesman from Ames, even a bank officer who had come under the excuse of checking on operating loans, though everyone knew why he was really there. Carl raised his voice just enough. "Let's make it interesting," he said. The group leaned in. $10,000, Carl continued, smiling now. "My John Deere against your... What did you pay for it again?" Walter didn't answer. $400? Carl said, laughing lightly. 10,000, says mine, outworks yours by noon. And then it happened. The laugh. Not just Carl. The others joined in, some louder, some quieter, but all of them certain. Certain in the way people are when the math looks obvious. A 130-horsepower machine versus a relic from the 1940s. Walter let the sound pass, didn't interrupt it, didn't react to it. When it faded, he said one thing. "Same field, same plow." Carl shrugged. "Of course." Walter pushed himself off the fence post slowly. "All right then. Had you ever been in a moment where everyone in the room agreed on something, and you knew, quietly, without needing to argue, that they were all wrong?" Carl shook Walter's hand, like it was already settled. The bank officer wrote the number down. $10,000. Cash. Settled by noon. Carl climbed into the cab of the 4440, the door shutting with a clean, insulated thud that separated him from the dust, the heat, and the older way of doing things. Walter walked to the shed. The door creaked open. The Farmall M rolled out slowly, engine already warm, exhaust carrying that deep, steady rhythm that only old cast-iron engines seem to hold. No cab, no insulation, no polish, just a machine that had never once quit a field halfway through. They lined up at opposite ends. Same plow, same depth, same soil. Carl glanced across once. Walter didn't look back. The signal came from the bank officer, just a raised hand. It dropped. Both tractors moved, and for the first 30 seconds, everything went exactly the way Carl expected, until it didn't. The first pass looked like a demonstration. Carl's John Deere 4440 surged forward with effortless strength, the kind that made it seem like the soil was barely there at all. 6-bottom plows slicing clean, uniform furrows. The cab sealing him off from dust and heat while the engine held steady at 2,200 revolutions per minute. From a distance, it looked like speed alone would settle the bet before the hour was out. Walter's Farmall M moved slower. No question about it. The plow cut narrower. The engine sounded louder because there was nothing between it and the open air. Every vibration passed through the steel seat straight into Walter's back. But it never faltered. Let me tell you about torque. Horsepower gets all the attention because it sounds impressive. Big number some machines. But torque, that's what actually moves weight. Torque is what keeps a tractor pulling when the soil gets heavy, when the moisture changes, when the plow hits resistance that isn't visible from the surface. Old engines, especially ones built in the 1940s and 1950s, were designed with long strokes and heavy rotating assemblies. They didn't spin fast, but they didn't need to. They held power low, steady and stubborn, like a man who doesn't raise his voice but doesn't step back either. Carl didn't think about torque. Not yet. By the third pass, he started noticing something. The soil wasn't uniform. This wasn't a clean, even feel like the ones used in dealer demonstrations. Boone County soil, especially that year, carried uneven moisture pockets from a late spring thaw followed by a sudden dry spell. Some sections turned easy. Others gripped like clay. Carl adjusted speed, dropped a gear, increased throttle. The 4440 responded exactly as it should, but it also began to work harder. Inside the cab, the temperature stayed controlled. The sound stayed contained. But the engine load climb and the fuel gauge, something Carl hadn't expected to think about, moved just enough to be noticeable. Walter didn't adjust anything. Same gear, same throttle, same pace. Have you ever pushed something harder because you thought that's what winning required, only to realize too late that pushing harder wasn't the same as working smarter? By mid-morning, the difference wasn't speed anymore. It was consistency. Carl's passes were faster, yes, but each time the soil changed, he compensated. Gear shifts, throttle changes, slight corrections that added seconds. Then minutes. Walter's passes looked identical. Every row, no corrections, no hesitation, just steady pulling. The spectators started noticing. The parts salesman stopped talking. The neighboring farmers stepped closer to the field edge. Even the bank officer looked down at his notes, then back up again, like something wasn't adding up. Carl finished the pass and turned hard, lining up again quickly. Walter turned wider, slower, but he never stopped moving. Let me tell you about Walter Green. He had been farming that same 160 acres since 1941, through droughts, through floods, through years when corn sold for less than it cost to grow. He had rebuilt that Farmall M's engine twice himself, in 1962 and again in 1975, using parts ordered by mail and measurements checked with tools older than Carl. He knew every inch of that field, not in theory. In memory, he knew where the soil held water longer, where the subsoil rose closer to the surface, where the plow would bite deeper without warning. Carl was reacting to the field. Walter was working with it. By 11:15 a.m., something shifted, not in the machines, in the people watching. Carl's rows started to show slight inconsistencies, depth variations, minor skips where traction slipped just enough to matter. Walter's rows looked the same from one end to the other, and then the first real problem hit. Carl's tractor slowed, just slightly, but enough. He adjusted again, dropped another gear. The engine roared louder. The plow dug in, and the machine hesitated. Across the field, Walter didn't even look up. The Farmall M kept pulling. Same sound, same pace. And for the first time that morning, Carl stopped smiling, because he realized something no one else had said out loud yet. This wasn't about speed anymore. And what Walter Green did next made impossible for anyone there to pretend otherwise. By 11:32 a.m., the field had turned quiet in a way that had nothing to do with sound. Both machines were still running, engines steady, steel cutting soil. But the people watching had stopped talking entirely, like they were witnessing something they didn't yet have the language to explain. Carl felt it first in the steering wheel, a resistance that was a mechanical failure, but wasn't normal either. He pushed forward. The John Deere 4440 answered with power. Plenty of it. The engine wasn't the issue. The design wasn't the issue. The field was. That section, 20 acres on the north end, held a layer of compacted clay beneath the topsoil, something Walter had known about since 1954, when a drainage ditch failed and flooded the area for 3 straight weeks. Carl didn't know that, so he did what made sense. He pushed harder. More throttle, more demand. The tractor dug in, and then the rear wheels slipped, not dramatically, not all at once, just enough to break rhythm. He corrected, again, but now the timing was off. Each adjustment cost him seconds. Each second stacked into minutes. Across the field, Walter reached the same section. No change in speed. No change in sound. The Farmall M hit the heavier soil and leaned into it. That's the only way to describe it. The engine note dropped slightly, not straining, just settling deeper into its power band. The plow held. The wheels gripped. The machine didn't fight the soil. It worked through it. Have you ever stood in front of something difficult and realized the person next to you wasn't stronger than you? They just understood the problem better? Carl saw it. He didn't want to, but he did. Walter wasn't catching up. He was staying the same. And that was worse. Because consistency doesn't look impressive at first. It just wins. Let me tell you about maintenance. Carl's tractor had been rebuilt by professionals. Precision parts. Clean tolerances. Everything exactly as the manual required. Walter's had been rebuilt by hands. Clearances checked by feel. Adjustments made based on sound. Oil changed not by hours on a meter, but by the way it looked when it drained. It wasn't better. It was familiar, and familiarity, in a field like that, mattered more than specifications. By 11:48 a.m., Carl's fuel gauge dropped below a line he hadn't planned on crossing before noon. He noticed it, and that's when doubt finally showed up. Not loud, not obvious, just a thought, a quiet one. This might not go the way I said it would. Walter reached the end of another pass, turned, lined up again, same pace. Same rhythm. Carl finished his row seconds later. But seconds mattered now, because the bank officer was already checking his watch, because the crowd had stopped standing in one group and started spreading out along the field, tracking progress like it was something measurable now, because the laughter from earlier that morning hadn't come back. Carl pushed again. The tractor responded, but not cleanly. The field wasn't forgiving mistakes anymore. Walter didn't make any. By 11:56 a.m., the difference was visible, not in distance. In completion, Walter's rows were done. Carl had one left. Just one. He could finish it. He knew he could. But finishing it wouldn't change what had already happened. And as the clock edged closer to noon, the man who had laughed first realized he was about to be the one everyone remembered. Because at exactly 11:59 a.m., Walter Green lifted his plow, idled down the engine, and turned toward the road, while Carl Whitaker was still in the field. At 12:03 p.m., the engines were off, both of them. The field sat open and quiet again, rows cut deep into the soil like lines written in something permanent. Carl climbed down from the John Deere 4440 slower than he had climbed up that morning, not because he was tired, because he was thinking. Walter was already by the fence, same place he had started, same posture. The bank officer didn't speak right away. He didn't need to. Everyone there had seen it, counted it, understood it. Carl walked across the gravel road. The same path, different man. He reached Walter and stopped. For a moment, he looked like he might argue, explain, reframe what had happened. He didn't. Instead, he reached into his truck, pulled out an envelope, and handed it over. 10,000, he said. Walter took it, didn't count it. Carl let out a breath. I was wrong, he added. No excuses, no qualifiers. Just that. Let me tell you what changed after that day. Carl didn't sell his tractor, didn't need to. It was still one of the best machines money could buy in 1983. But he stopped talking about horsepower the way he used to, stopped leading with numbers. He started asking questions instead, real ones, about soil, about history, about why some machines stayed and others didn't. He came back to Walter's far more than once that summer, not to compete, to learn. Walter never made a speech about it, never told anyone he had proven a point. He just kept farming. Same land, same machine, until October of 1991, when he passed away in his sleep at 79 years old. The Farmall M stayed. Carl bought it from Walter's daughter for $400. The same price. He didn't restore it, didn't repaint it. He kept it exactly the way it was, faded, worn, functional. And every spring, before he started his larger equipment, he would take that old tractor out for one pass across his field. Not because it was efficient, because it reminded him. 10 years later, in 2001, Carl stood in front of a group of younger farmers at a county equipment demonstration. Someone asked him what the most important feature in a tractor was. He didn't mention horsepower. He didn't mention hydraulics. He pointed to the Farmall M part behind him. That one, he said, never tried to be impressive. It just did the work. Let me tell you about legacy. It isn't what people say about you when you're there. It's what they repeat when you're gone. Walter Green never raised his voice, never chased a trend, never tried to win an argument. But on one morning in June of 1983, he showed a field full of people that understanding something deeply will always outlast trying to overpower it. The Farmall still runs today. Carl's son uses it now. Same fields, same soil, different generation, same lesson. Some things don't become obsolete. They just wait for someone patient enough to prove they never were. If you've ever known someone like Walter, someone who didn't need to argue to be right, someone who kept something running long after the world said it was finished, tell me about them in the comments. I read every story. And there's one coming soon about a farmer in Kansas who buried a broken combine engine for 9 years instead of scrapping it. And what he pulled out of that ground changed everything.